It's easy to assume something's wrong when our faith doesn't feel the way it used to. There are seasons when things feel open and alive, and then there are other times when it just feels harder. Prayer doesn't come as easily, your energy might be lower, even your sense of God can feel a little out of reach. And it's subtle. You're showing up, you still care, but something just feels thin. A lot of us quietly carry that, and we don't always know what to do with it. Hi, friends. I'm Jem Fadling, and this is the Unhurried Living podcast, where we inspire you to rest deeper, live fuller, and lead better. Today's conversation is with Tish Harrison Warren, and she's inviting us not to rush past these seasons. She helps us slow down enough to notice what might be happening there and why these places we'd rather avoid might matter more than we think. As you're listening to this podcast or watching us on YouTube, I'd love if you would follow us or subscribe. It's absolutely free and it helps Unhurried Living be discovered by more people. Well, today's guest is Tish Harrison Warren, an Anglican priest and award-winning author known for her deeply thoughtful and grounded writing on everyday faith. Many of you will know her from her award-winning books Liturgy of the Ordinary and Prayer in the Night. Her newest book, What Grows in Weary Lands, explores something many of us feel but don't often name: seasons of spiritual dryness, fatigue, and even a sense of distance from God. Drawing from her own experience as well as the wisdom of early Christian monastics, Tish offers a way of understanding these seasons not as interruptions to faith, but as part of its formation. This is a conversation for anyone who feels tired or stuck or quietly aware to the questions. Well, thank you, Tish Harrison Warren. Thank you for saying yes to the Unhurried Living podcast.
Yeah, thank you for asking.
Yeah, we've enjoyed following all of your books, and this latest one is no exception. And I thought we could just dive right in and cut right to the chase at the beginning, because
Great.
Most of us do not appreciate that long, slow unfolding of our lives, which I'm learning is the way it works.
Yes,
we want things right.
I really don't. That's why I had to write the book, because I really, really don't. Yeah.
Most people that I speak with want things to happen fast. Like if there was a switch, we could turn them. But this book you've written, first of all, is beautiful. I love your writing just as an author, how beautifully you write, but also how compellingly, if that's a word, compellingly.
Yeah, that's a word.
You write. So I'm wondering if we could jump right in here, right there at the culture where we're trying to flip switches and make things happen fast. But maybe we could talk about this messy middle. Can you just sort of open us up right there, this messy middle of life that a lot of us might be finding ourselves in?
Yeah, I wrote this book. It does feel like a midlife or mid-faith book. And yeah, I'm really realizing that. Like it's really coming out of my own midlife. I'm super midlife right now and mid-faith. So and I talk in the book about how I feel like we tell stories, or maybe particularly evangelicalism is focused on the beginnings, the excitement, youthful exuberance, being on fire for Jesus, conversions, kind of the discipleship of new starts and new beginnings, and sometimes, although this isn't always true of evangelicalism, but there's some places where we have space for kind of sages, like people. I think of like Eugene Peterson at the end of his life, or people that are at the end, at the last age, or dying, or very old, but there's this long stretch in the middle that I just do not think the American church has talked about really in overt ways, and also doesn't really have a lot of resources for that. They don't talk about the kind of changing seasons of life and times of weariness, or times where we have to keep going. We still have a long time to go for most of us, but but our energy is lagging, or we feel like we are running out of steam. And I think the historic church talks about that quite a lot, talks about patience quite a lot, has a very sort of long view of discipleship. But that is not something I have had. I do not think that kind of growing up in the American church and the evangelical church really prepared me for the different seasons of the spiritual life, and for seasons that are not new or exuberant, but also are not in times of deepest grief or the valley of the shadow of death, that are somewhere in the middle. And I just wrote this book really, really craving middle stories.
Do you find yourself in midlife right now? And so you probably were able to draw on your own feelings and experiences.
Yeah.
Like real time.
Yeah, I draw a lot on my own feelings and experiences. The book is not written so much as a, hey, this is what I learned. Here's the 5 steps through the desert or the middle. I explicitly use the language of field notes. It's kind of a field notes from what I am experiencing. And so it's not that I give practices, but I don't exactly give solutions. In fact, I'm skeptical of the idea that like the desert is something that we need to solve or get through or rush through or hurry through or figure out our way to get into some better flourishing place. I think the middle lands are the place that we meet God. And so that's what I tried to kind of bring out. And not only do I talk about my own life, I think I wrote the book to try to figure out my own life. I mean, I think it started as like a series of journal entries that were very poorly written and had to be edited over many years into what it is today.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, I did sense you, of course, as a companion, more than an answer giver as I was reading it. And I really appreciate that tone. And not only were you a companion with us, but you pointed to a lot of other companions, which was so good. And we will definitely get into that. But let's hover here again, just on this idea of middle, whatever that means for somebody. You don't have to be in the middle of life to experience that sensation. There's other words, right? The wilderness. One of the words you chose was aridity, which we don't use that word very often.
No.
And sometimes when people find themselves there, they think there's something wrong. So can we talk about that for a minute? Maybe there's not something wrong. Maybe this is part of the process. What does that mean?
Yeah, that was a huge thing. I wanted to give people the word aridity because I had not really been given that word. And also, I just think the book came out of me hitting a time where it felt like God was very distant. And I would pray and it felt like I didn't know where God was in the middle of that, in the middle of my prayer life. It felt, the word I used to my husband it was like the line had gone dead, like, or the call had dropped. And I had no category for that wasn't that I was doing something wrong or that I was somehow in sin or that God was, had other better people to deal with than me. I just didn't know what I was doing or what I should be doing to make my subjective experience of prayer more fruitful. And so this concept of aridity, which is written about, aridity is from the Desert Fathers and Mothers, that language, so that it's 1700 years old or more. So I just hadn't been exposed to that this could actually be not just that I wasn't doing something wrong, but this is a part of the Christian life that is an important way to grow, an important part of maturity, a way that we need to, something we actually need to lean into because it is part of discipleship. This, I had no idea. This was totally new. This was a totally new idea to me. So part of why I did this is for people like me. I mean, like I kind of wrote this book for me 3 years ago to be like, what did I need to hear? And I needed to be told, this is normal part of the Christian life that you're in.
For
And not
sure.
just normal, but like good. Like it doesn't feel good. I'm not saying it feels good, but that it is. There are things that you have to learn here that you can only learn here in this state.
And that is something that you can only learn by experience. People can say that to you, but the beauty and the depth of what actually happens, you have to experience to understand that. I mean, I'm older. I've got some years on you, and so I've had a few dark nights over the course of my decades, and I still remember what midlife was like. And I had a mentor at the time that basically said, midlife is when your car runs out of gas, and then you find that it doesn't run on gas anymore. You don't know what it runs on, but somehow you're going to figure it out. And so that sensation of being out of control, of thinking you knew how everything worked, but it doesn't work that way. And the sort of the discombobulation of that is troubling at best. But I have found, as you've just shared, and so have you and many of our listeners, that it is those dry, maybe quiet, foggy, deserty, whatever label you want to put on it. It's those patches that really do something deeper and richer than if we had our, just our full cognitive mind intact,
Yeah, that's right. What you said about the car, I love that metaphor. That would have been helpful to put in the book. There's so much in these interviews. I'm like, man, I wish I would have had this before I wrote it. But that I talk about Stanley Hauerwas having this idea of learning how to go on when we do not know where we are. And I think that is this middle section, is you don't know quite where you are. You don't know what the car runs on, but you have to learn how to go on. And that's not just survival. I think that there's like this deep invitation to that, to something new and something different. But it feels so disorienting. And particularly if you've been given a version of faith that's sort of like you believe the right things, you do the right practices, and then you have a great experience with God, or life will go well for you, or you'll know where you are.
Right.
And then you get there and you're like, wait, but I do believe, and I am praying. And why does this feel like it's not working now? And so, I had a spiritual director in the middle of this sort of season of my own life that would say things. I would say things like, I don't know where I am. I feel lost. And she would say, okay, well, maybe just be lost for a little while, or maybe just don't know where you are for a while. And I would say, well, I don't know that anything's happening. And she would say, okay, well, maybe just not know if anything's happening. And this drove me nuts. This drove me crazy, because that is not what I wanted. I wanted to be like, no. Tell me how to not be lost. Tell me how to be found. Tell me what the car, I will put whatever you tell me to in this car. Just tell me the answer and I'll do it. And I certainly don't want to just not know if something is happening. I mean, that's terrible. And, but I mean, now with some time, I think she was saying, yeah, just lean into exactly where you are. Don't try to get out of it. Don't try to solve it. And for people like me who like to feel like we have some level of control over our spiritual lives, that just drives me nuts. I mean, it's just so hard. So,
for sure. Oh my goodness. I find myself saying that often to people these days, as well as a spiritual director. The image I like to use for staying with cars and moving around in paths and stuff is, it's sort of like being at the fork in the road where you see the path behind you and there's some options out there, but you don't know where to go. And we just talk about how that spot right there before you go wherever's next is actually a valid place to be. It's the same way of saying what your spiritual what if this is a place?
Mm.
And I think that's a really important conversation. That's why I love your book so much, is you're saying, yes, this is a place. It's valid. It's real. It feels like a wilderness, but good fruit can be born. And there's many, many who have come before us who have lived it and have so much wisdom about what can happen in that space. And so, but again, it's very not, because I came up through the regular conservative evangelical stream as well. And so I have had all those tendencies, of wanting things to be fast and understandable and controllable and manageable, all of those things. But the place I find myself these days is just I'm not saying it's perfect, but I find myself the most open-handed I've ever been, only because I've lived long enough to see how things just don't always go the way you want them to go. And somehow I've made it through every season, every patch and there's a simplicity here of whatever it means to hold on to my best understanding of what God is doing at the time in my life. And so it's probably easier at this point to look back and go, oh, well, all you got to do is hang in there, right? And it's going to pass, and there's going to be so much good fruit afterward. But it is good to just sit with people in the middle and say, what if this is a place?
Yeah. Yeah. And we can't really look back on our lives at the moment. Like we can't, like I would like to make up a story of what this place is. I would like to say, 10 years from now, I'm going to look back and be like, look at all that's just do it. But I don't know. That's like faith. That is, I have no idea. But it helps me that I can look back on other people's lives, meaning this is why I feel like learning from Christians who went before me are helpful. I mean, first of all, like people like you, you just told me that story of there were times I was at this place and it felt like nothing was happening. And God, I can look back. But also like in these desert fathers and mothers just expected the faith to take, they would pray for things for decades and decades and decades. They struggled with anger for like so long and just kept struggling, or that, they would. And so to look back and, even just like I talk about Teresa in the book and Saint Teresa and her struggle with doubt, and now we know the end. We know that right before she died, literally kind of on her deathbed, she had this experience of God, but she didn't know that at the time. And I think that's one of the difficult things about doubt or about aridity is that you never know how long it lasts. It's one of the hard things that requires trust and patience is you don't know how the story's going to unfold.
That is the hardest part, the not knowing, and then probably believing that it's going to take far longer than I want. So you use some beautiful, beautiful images for all of your chapter titles, which I love. And one of the phrases I like is staying in your cell. Mm-hmm. So I wonder if maybe you would unpack, what does that mean? Stay in your cell.
Yeah, I would say it's kind of the key inside the book. Like the key thing I want people to be thinking about, although the book unfolds, because I don't think it's enough just to stay in your cell. I think it matters how and why, which is kind of the rest of the book. But I think the idea of stay in your cell, what the desert mothers and fathers who a lot of the teaching of the book is kind of framed around their sayings, but they would constantly tell each other to stay in the cell. It was just this off. As you read through their writings, you hear it again and again. Times of weariness, times when prayer felt difficult, times of when they would struggle with their own temptation. And monks were tempted to leave their cell for all kinds of reasons. One was, I should say for people, like a cell was their room or their hut or their cave where they lived. So it was the place of prayer, but also the place of work and life. So it represents this really holistic idea of you stay in your cell means to keep it prayer, but it also means to keep in the place you're in and the relationships you're in the habits and rhythms you're in, both in prayer, but also in things like work or daily maintenance of your life. And so it's like and at the end that is a call to the vows that you have, to the life you has as a monk. So it's bigger than sort of the evangelical, like, just keep having your quiet. It's a bigger kind of holistic vision of stability. And so monks, fathers and mothers would say this to each other because monks were often tempted. I mean, they would leave their cell because they were bored and they were looking for distraction, looking for something outside of their cell, or because they were really, I just read this morning a story of a monk that was just discouraged over his sin and how long he had struggled with lust and how he like couldn't get free from it. And so he left his cell because he was like, I'm not good enough. I can't do this. I'm not good enough to be a monk. And elder monk ran into him and said, you are not made whole by your efforts, but by God's mercy. Stay in your cell, meaning go back, like just continue to struggle, but know that like it's God's mercy that makes you whole. And so sometimes it was guilt, or sometimes it was distraction, or sometimes it was what is would be translated, or the word is acedia. It's what's translated as kind of distaste for spiritual things, a longing for ease. There were all kinds of things that tempted monks to leave their cell, even sometimes spiritual things, like the idea of like, oh, if I was elsewhere, God would use me more. If I was elsewhere, I would be more holy. And they constantly called each other to remain, to stay exactly in the place they're in.
I love
so that's
that.
what the chapter's about. Yeah.
That's so good. I think what you just said is worth highlighting, that it was not his effort, but God's mercy. And I think I get that backwards a lot. I think it's something I have to do or need to do or must do that will help this change. But what you're talking about is he was sent back to his cell to receive something in the midst of what he was actually experiencing, instead of trying to get rid of it, which I understand. He probably wants to stop being lustful, whatever. But do you know what I'm saying? Like there's something to be received, and not just this clenched fist activity on my part, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting. It wasn't, and this story is not in the book. I wish I would have put it in it, sort of, but it wasn't, it's mercy, so go do whatever you want. I mean, it was this mercy. Well, yeah. So then he's calling him back to his life, to his vows, to saying that this is not on you to, I mean, he's essentially like, you're right, you're not good enough to be a monk, but that's not the point. The point is God's mercy and grace. And so go back and live the life you're called to. And so there's this freedom that comes with an invitation to stay, which is beautiful.
So good. So that's sort of the vow of stability for the Benedictines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, explicitly. I mean, Benedict read these early fathers and mothers and made his rule really inspired by them. And so that idea of staying in your cell became the Benedictine idea of stability, which Benedictine monks now still take the vow of stability, but they also talk about stability of the heart, stabilitas cordis, this sort of deeply rooted stability that keeps us from just sort of chasing the latest spiritual fad, or from running after, being tossed around by our emotions or by the trends, but really being rooted deeply in our hearts, in who Jesus is and who we are called to be. Which I think that stabilitas cordis, I think that's what is formed in the middle. I think that's what comes when things feel when things are no longer new, I think that that's when we learn to stay, we learn to remain.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a depth of, another word that's coming to mind is just the word sturdy. There's like a solidness, a sturdiness to your heart and your soul. And again, that happens as a fruit of staying in the time. Because if I were to describe anything that happened to me after what appeared to me to be a dark night or a wilderness, I could only say that it seemed like it just happened, which to me means the thing that changed in me that became either more natural or something that fell off that I needed to let go of. I feel like it was more of a fruit of hanging in there as opposed to me trying to do something. And that's why I always say it is totally a gift, because there will be fruit born. I don't know what it is or what it will look like for you, but God's always up to something that leads to goodness in the end. And not in a Pollyanna way, but for real.
Yeah, I don't get super into this in the book, but I think a good illustration of what you're saying is the life of Jesus. Like he has this very beginning of his public ministry. Like first thing, this is the newness, the conversion, the excitement, Jesus wasn't converted obviously, but metaphorically it's the start.
Yeah. Right.
At his baptism. And he's announced the air, we get this voice, this is my beloved son in whom I am well pleased. The Spirit descends like a dove, like super exciting, fruitful time. And then he does not go straight into his public ministry of healing or work or preaching. He just goes to the desert. So it's this weird, nobody would write a play like this. You would never have this big moment and then a lot of nothing, not a lot of nothing happening. He's out there. It's a long time. He's tempted by the devil. There's no preaching happening. It feels like what's going on, but theologically it was significant, of course, because it is pointing back to Israel and their wandering in the desert. But what you're saying is also true, is it's this, he leaves the desert and seemingly all of these things just happen, right, in his life. But that's all preparation. There was deep work that was happening in the spiritual realm and presumably in Jesus' own life. Obviously his preparation is different than ours, being sinless and God. But that was a time of, that time was not insignificant. And that time was necessary for what came next. But when you're actually in the middle of a desert in your own life, it feels like, what the heck is happening? It feels like, what's going on? And it's what we were saying, you don't know what's next.
Right. Yeah. So good. I want to pivot to, there's a story in there that I love because I have my own version of this. You have a nursing mother story.
Yes, I do.
I think it's so cool.
Me about that.
Oh, well, because I have my own nursing mother story. I'm like, I've never seen anybody else talk about this, meeting God as a nursing mother. And so I was struck by it. So I was wondering if you could give us just a snippet of that and what that meant for you at that time.
Yeah. Well, I tell the story of nursing my oldest daughter and weaning her when she was about 2 years old. And the story I tell is just that she was crying and crying, and it was really difficult. I don't know if listeners have weaned a child, and people have very strong opinions about this. Some people think that doing this is really bad for your kid, which, we pay for her therapy. So, or we will pay for her therapy when she needs it. But, we were weaning her because I was pregnant again, my second, and she was crying, and eventually I just couldn't just leave her in there to cry. I couldn't do the cry it out thing, so I put on turtleneck, so she could not get the goods she was seeking easily, and I just went and held her, and And after just a very brief time, a minute or so, she just quieted down and just curled up next to me and just sat with me. And I wasn't nursing her anymore. She just, and I tell the story. I eventually put her down. She fell asleep. I go back and crawl in bed with my husband, who whispers to me in the dark because he's awake now. I mean, a baby screaming, like everyone's awake. But he said, did you cave? Meaning, like, did I just nurse her? Because he had heard it just go silent. And I said, no, she didn't want the milk. She just wanted me. And he was like, oh, that's extreme. That's really beautiful. And I use that as a metaphor in the book because John of the Cross talks about setting aside, I mean, essentially that God nurses us, and at some point he sets aside, I can't remember, we set aside our swaddling clothes, I think he says, and he's using this metaphor of God seemingly withdrawing as we move from like infant to weaning. And of course he draws this from the Psalms with the psalm about we come to God as a weaned child. And I say in the book, I always resisted the metaphor. I didn't understand it. I'm like, don't we come to God like a nursing child? Why do we come to God like a weaned child? My heart is quieted like a weaned child in your presence but we rely on God for all things. It feels like, isn't a baby more reliant on their mom when they're nursing? Don't we come to God for nourishment? I didn't understand the weaned part. And it was, but I talk about in that moment, there was something that shifted in my relationship with my daughter, that it was no longer an instrumental relationship or a relationship of exchange or something. She didn't need me for what I could give her. She was sufficient in her nutritional intake. She wanted me. It was just my presence that she wanted.
Right.
And so I talk about coming to God for God's own sake, for God's presence, as opposed to what God can give us. And that is kind of the shift that happens in aridity. Instead of coming to God for a particular spiritual experience or for insight or to address a problem we have, but to come to God for the sake of God. So that's why I told
I loved it. So good. I think it's important for us to have different kinds of metaphors like that, because you don't always get to hear the vantage point of a nursing mother.
I have used that in a sermon. I've talked about nursing in a sermon before, and I always make the same joke, which is that if I can sit through football metaphors, you can sit through a nursing mother.
For sure. You can make the same joke later on about menopause. Hey, if I can sit through that, you guys can talk about menopause for 5 minutes, okay?
I've never heard a menopause metaphor in a sermon.
There's got to be one.
Maybe we need to start doing more of that.
Oh, gosh.
What do you want to share? I mean, we don't have to. It's your podcast. But what is your nursing mother story that you said you I don't know if
I might have shared this on the podcast years ago, but yeah, so I just shared it recently. I spoke for a Momco group. It used to be MOPS, and so I pull out this story every time because it's just meets them right where they are. So yeah, very similar. When I had a toddler and a nursing baby. One time, it was back, I always joke about how it was before phones, so all I did was nurse. I went to my bedroom, I had a rocking chair, I had no distraction. I literally just nursed my baby, because this was in the 90s before we had all the gadgets. And I would look at his face and I'm holding him. And it was in that place where you have a toddler and a newborn and you're just trying to figure out how to get through the day. And any good girl Christian to-do list, check-off list that I had was out the window for me at that time. And so, because I was still attached to that idea of there's things you have to do to stay a good Christian, but I was unable to keep up with that. So that was sort of a hovering thing. And the reason I share that is because I'm nursing my son. I'm looking down at his sweet little face and just having that nurturing sensation. And all of a sudden, I felt like the Holy Spirit was talking to me, saying, Jim, this is how I feel about you.
Mm.
That I like in the moment when I'm having this very tender sensation of holding my child right here and looking in his sweet little face. This is how I feel about you. Right. And along with it came another couple of words that really changed my connection to God at the time. And it was these words. I guess this is 4 words. This counts. And that was a life-changing. I was 31 at the time. I remember because that's how old I was when my second son was born. And it changed my connection with God. Is like you said, it's not transactional anymore. It's like there's multiple ways that God wants to let me know that he is with me, that I'm connected to him. And there's multiple ways for that to manifest itself other than the very short list that I had of what counted. And so again, not to say we don't do spiritual practice. Of course we do. I'm a spiritual director. I tell people this all the time. But it was like God was opening me up when I was young to just say there's so many ways that we could connect, Jam. And my heart was just so open in that moment. And God wanted to affirm that he saw me and that he felt affection for me. And that this connection I had with my son was very similar to what we had and that it counted. And so I still tell that story because it affected me deeply. It's like 30 years ago. And I just haven't ever heard anyone else share a nursing mother story. So I was very intrigued when I saw it in your book.
Yay. That's great. Yeah, it's right there. Second chapter.
Yeah. So good. So it's always fun to share nursing mother stories. So all the men can tune back in now. That's all right.
I don't know. It's there in the Psalms. It feels
totally.
Like the psalmist, you just can't get any more male than the psalmist. And he put it in there. So yeah.
Like a weaned child. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just think it's good. It is good to have that sort of feminine, nurturing aspect of God brought forth every once in a while. So on that note, though, let's turn for a minute here to something different, which the other one was about the cell. One of your other titles was Relax the Bow.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that story too. So by the way, she's not giving away everything that's in the book, but I love that story so much. Again, because we're unhurried living. And so that story was 100% on brand for us because we talked to leaders.
That is.
This is exactly.
That's true.
So
but
this is unhurried.
Like the 4th century, it might be 5th, but I mean, isn't that amazing? It's amazing to know that
is so amazing.
Unhurried living is this is not a new trend. Christians have been talking about this for 1,500 years. Yeah.
For sure. Oh, it goes all the way back. All the different authors through all the centuries have had different ways where they thought that they were living in this really busy, hurried time and we need to just slow down. And I'm like, you people don't have phones. What are you talking about? You have no idea. So I would love it if you could tell that story, if you can remember it.
I might have to read it.
In regards to unhurried leadership, I think I have a little snippet of it here if you want me to read the quote. Does that help?
Sure. Yeah. It's a kind of
and
a
then
long
maybe
story.
And then talk about that. So anyway, it's in her chapter, Relax the Bow. And she's talking about St. Anthony. And he came upon a hunter was concerned because he found Anthony just hanging out with his brothers. They were just hanging out, whatever that meant. So Anthony asked the hunter to pull out his bow and to keep drawing it further and further and further. Now draw it further and further. And then the hunter finally said, if I draw it too far, the bow will snap. And then Anthony replied, so it is with God's work. If we always go to excess, the brothers quickly become exhausted. It is sometimes best not to be rigid. I just thought that was so good.
Yeah.
Such a good lesson. So maybe talk about that for a minute.
Yeah. So the problem with talking about desert fathers and mothers is that they do seem at times, I mean, they don't just seem, they are at times extreme. I mean, these people fasted for weeks and weeks. They're really intense. At times it does seem a little works righteousness-y, or I mean, the theological word would be like Pelagian. So people either know what that means or don't. I won't get into it, but I think, and I think there's some of that does hit, and there's some of that is real. What has been interesting to me in reading them is there's other places and people where grace just really, really shines through pretty clearly. I mean, the thing I read this morning about this monk feeling like, oh, I'm still struggling and I'm not good enough. And this older monk, I think it's Apollonitis, I think, says, hey, I'm really old and I am more spiritually advanced than you, and I still struggle with this. And God, it is not your efforts, it is God's mercy. So stay in yourself, go back. You're like, and so there is these moments where it's just this, there's so much grace and there's so much. They constantly talk about not judging others. They constantly talk about how the worst our sins we don't even really see. The things that are the most disordered in our life are often we're the most blind to. And so it does come down to God's kindness and mercy to us. So there are, I mean, these people were severe at times, but there's all these moments of grace. And this is one of them where Anthony was so intense. He was like literally battling demons. Like that's how at least it talks about him fighting with demons and fasting and praying. And he went out and lived in the desert. And then he has this moment where he's like, yeah, don't be rigid. Just like, this is so interesting that they were able to be, the language I use in the book is able to be wholehearted, but lighthearted at the same time. And this feels like some kind of spiritual jujitsu that I'm not up to yet, that I'm like wanting to learn of like, how do you be completely wholehearted, undivided in your pursuit of God? And then say, yeah, but relax. And it's not up to you. And they held both of those. And I think it's a bit of an emotional paradox to live in that. But you just see that over and over again, these moments of that. And I find it really encouraging. And I even love that he was like, the brothers will get exhausted. Like this is they need levity. They need rest. They need relaxation. I think the language that the story actually said, I use the language of hanging out. I think the story said something of just sitting with the brothers talking in a relaxed way. I mean, they were like shooting the bull, basically. They were chilling out. They were just hanging out. And so, and we hear, it's just crazy because all the stories you hear about Anthony are these like, he's like seeing visions of angels. He's talking to demons. He's fasting. There's like visions. He's having pillars of light in the desert, like crazy stuff. And I love the idea of him, but he also apparently just sat around and hung out sometime. It was great. We just don't hear enough about that with the saints,
Right.
Just like he just was chilling. So
yeah, that makes sense though, right? Because everybody has an actual life that they're living every single day. There can't be something amazing or intense happening all day, every day.
He saw that as spiritually important too. I mean, he saw it as a way of loving his fellow brothers and a way of, he was instructing the hunter to not bifurcate life into spiritual activities and unspiritual activities, but to see all of this, to see rest as part of the spiritual life.
Good. I'd like to end kind of where you end near the end of the book. We're talking about desert plants. I also like that story. Can you sort of end us here? I think you were talking about the tenacity of a desert plant.
Mm-hmm.
How might that be encouragement to us?
Yeah, I talk at the end about adaptations of plants to survive in the desert. And they all feel, it's very obvious. I'm very addicted to metaphor. I love metaphors. This book has a lot of them. But it feels like all of these natural adaptations have spiritual metaphors to them. These plants that survive in really harsh conditions without rain. they survive in all different ways. Some of them are able to, they have the ability to essentially wick moisture from the air. So any bit of moisture. They also save things. Like if they get rain, they'll save it for a long, long time. And so it will sustain. You see this with cactuses. So I talk about it as this ability to kind of draw and hold on to any goodness that you experience, any insight into God, that you kind of learn to take it all in and hold it. And then there's other plants that seem to die, resurrection plants, they're sometimes called. They go into such deep dormancy that they seem to die. But then any small amount of, just a trickle of water, and they'll kind of burst back into life. And botanists have seen this is decades. I mean, they've gone decades where it seemed like nothing was happening, and then they're totally alive again. And so they're like intensely resilient. And then I talk about there are trees. I think the Joshua tree, maybe one of acacia trees. Can't remember, but they go. Their roots go deep, 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 deep. Some as much as 100 feet, and they'll just keep growing deeper the drier it is until they find their source. And so I talk about these in different ways. I talk about wanting to take in every bit of goodness. I talk about wanting to be able to be dormant, but that does not mean that you're dead. That these plants don't. The resurrection plants, they're not dead. They're just they're in this place of dormancy. And then, of course, the rooted example of going deeper and deeper and deeper, that it is actually only in aridity that plants do deepen the roots and go down deep. And so I talk about each one as kind of a metaphor for what I want in my spiritual life. I want to grow in tenacity.
I love your metaphors. I think they're very helpful because they're images that we can understand and make use of in our life to help us understand some things that might be a little complicated to talk about.
Yeah.
So I can understand, yeah.
I'm convinced that we need the right metaphors, that we need them as much as food and water. And I don't publish poetry. I have written some, but it is unpublished. But there is the poetic part of me that is just really on the search for a good metaphor, which is partly why these desert mothers and fathers, they never say something directly. They speak in metaphor all the time. They speak in object lessons all the time. I think it's partly why I could, when I was in such a spiritually kind of desertous place, I was really drawn to them, is they never give you the answers, but they give you a load of metaphors. They give tons of metaphors.
I love it. Love a good metaphor. Well, you need to get Tish's book. I forgot to bring it over here. Where is it? What grows in weary lands. Love the chapter titles. Stay in your cell. Wait in the womb. Relax the bow. Let the silt settle. Brace the wall. See, they're all metaphors, and she unpacks it lovely inside. So I'm glad you said yes. Tish, thanks for having this conversation with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, let me press stop, and then I think you have to leave. Thank you for joining me on the Unhurried Living podcast. You can download free resources and learn more about us at unhurriedliving.com. And please subscribe and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues. We'd also like to thank our partner, Life Audio. Check out their other faith-centered podcasts at lifeaudio.com. Blessings to you as you make your way.